Just
on
camera.
Alright guys, welcome to All Sides of Kennebec. I'm Sean Karen, one of the hosts of this
Jeremy Lee's up.
New podcast. Today we have Eric Brakey, who is probably one of our esteemed guests that we've had so far.
I'm glad to be on with you.
Appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Eric. Pleasure's all mine.
Definitely. We started this podcast just to get a friendly voice out into the communities instead of having to read what he says, she says, so we can get your point of view. We do, as we go, if people come on live, don't hesitate to ask questions.
Right, it's audience participation.
Yes, that does help drive the direction of the podcast. So, got that there. But yeah, welcome to the show. How's the campaign been so far? I mean, how many months have you been at this now?
Well, the campaign's been awesome. We've been in this maybe about 2 months now. And we had an amazing launch in Auburn at Rolly's Diner there. And since then, I feel like zigzagging across all parts of the 2nd District, which, as you know, is huge. This is the biggest congressional district east of the Mississippi. There's a lot of ground to cover, a lot of people to meet, but it's been amazing. I've been to GOP meetings. It seems like every GOP meeting I go to, the turnout is 2 times, 3 times what they typically have. People have been hosting meet and greets where we've been meeting lots of new people. And of course I found that over the last year or so as I've been talking and communicating with people about issues in Augusta on Facebook Live, a lot of people have come to know me through that. This social media is really a powerful medium, but things have been going great. And our campaign ultimately is really it's about a free Maine and a free America. It's about what our country and our state was founded on. You know, next year is the 200th anniversary of the state of Maine. 200 years since we got our free state. And I look around at the government we have in Augusta and Washington, D.C., and I start to realize Maine people voted for this. And I start to think that perhaps a lot of us have forgotten what it means to be a Maine person. Because this state, when we joined the Union, we were the first state to join the Union specifically because of our love of freedom. Because they needed a free state to balance out Missouri coming in as a slave state. And this was a hotbed for the abolition movement. Maine people fought 3 times to secure our freedom and independence in the American Revolution, in the War of 1812, and in the Aroostook War. Our ancestors were willing to lay down and sacrifice so much to secure freedom for themselves and their posterity. And what are we doing with it today?
Right.
We're electing people who are destroying our Constitution, selling off our freedoms and liberties to special interests. And it's time to stand up. It's time to demand better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
So you're traveling around. What do you find is the biggest topic that people are talking to you about?
Well, of course, it's impossible to escape the impeachment proceedings going on, the witch hunt against President Donald Trump. And frankly, I know that people have different perspectives about President Trump. Personally, I'm a supporter of President Trump. There are some things I may disagree with. I disagreed with him when he was talking about red flag laws. Thankfully, he backed away from that. But at the end of the day, it is very discouraging for me to see not just the Democrats who are kind of leading this witch hunt against the president. I mean, frankly, that's what opposition parties do. When Barack Obama was president, Republicans never did an impeachment against him, but there certainly was a lot of opposition, blocking and tackling. That's what opposition parties do.
Sure.
What really concerns me is not so much what Democrats are doing, like Jared Golden and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Pelosi and all that, but what these unelected agencies, the CIA, the FBI, what they're doing, how these supposedly non-political, non-partisan agencies have so clearly become political, have inserted themselves into the political process, have interfered with the 2016 election, with the 2018 election. How you had even Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, openly admit that he spoke with people at the Department of Justice about trying to whip votes in the president's cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him from office. This is kind of some people have called it an attempted coup of what's going on in our country against the president. I think that what's at stake right now is much bigger than President Trump, whether you like him or not. I think what's really at stake is the question of whether or not we have government of the people, by the people, for the people,
right,
or whether or not we are moving towards a system where these unelected agencies are the ones calling the shots, and our elected government is just window dressing to convince us that we have a say.
Right. Some kind of fake democracy.
Yeah. I mean, I often kind of think about, I'm a student of history. I really like studying history, and when you go back to, of course, the American Republic is not the first great republic in history.
Right.
You had the Roman Republic, and the Roman Republic lasted 400 years, twice as long as our American experiment has lasted, but it still fell. It became an empire. Caesar crossed the Rubicon. But of course, for the people at that time, it wasn't always completely and totally clear what had happened. They didn't, they had the Senate in Rome. They didn't abolish the Senate. No, it was convenient for the emperor to maintain the Senate because that gave the people the illusion that they had a say in what went on. But the Senate just had no power. Kind of look at Washington D.C. these days. We elect people to go to Congress, and what do they occupy their time doing? They're naming post offices.
Right.
They're focusing their time on the inconsequential things. Well, the big decisions, how our economy is regulated, how our phones are monitored, where and when our children are sent off to war, these decisions are not being made by our elected officials. They're increasingly being made by these unelected agencies. And when we elect Donald Trump, when we elect people to Washington to try to make changes, these unelected agencies come along and say, no, we got to put you back in line. And I think that's where we are today. And I think that 2020 is an opportunity for us to declare very boldly that we, the people, are still in charge of this government. And if these unelected agencies don't think that's the case, then they need to be fired, or frankly, some of them probably deserve to be in jail.
Yeah, I agree.
So you've been going around the state, and what's been one of the top resonating questions that people have been asking you, like
outside of the impeachment?
Outside of the impeachment.
Well, I talk about a number of issues outside of impeachment. One of the issues that it's an issue that I don't think in the Republican Party we've talked enough about lately, but I'll tell you, when I talk about it, people get it. And it's something that hasn't actually been a Republican issue in the past, and that's really wrestling with and understanding what we put our soldiers through in these wars over the last 2 decades. I'll tell you, I was talking to a military mom in Dover Foxcroft just the other week when I was up there, and she was telling me how her son just finally came back from serving in the Middle East. He'd been there for close to 20 years.
Wow.
20 years. He witnessed his best friend killed right in front of him. And, you have every 2 years, you have these politicians come up and they say, I support our troops, I support our veterans. But you actually talk to our veterans and you hear what they're saying about these wars.
Yeah, they give us false
They don't want to be
pretense.
there.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're fighting for.
That's exactly what I hear from people. The mission's unclear.
I mean, recently I was just reading something online that was talking about how the wars lasted so long that now the people that had children, their children are old enough to go off to war.
Yeah.
So I think that alone speaks volumes of the wrong direction that this has been going.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly worth acknowledging that 18 years ago when we went into Afghanistan, we had a good reason for it. We were attacked on 9/11. Right. Our men and women in uniform signed up to go bring Osama bin Laden and the folks who conspired with him to justice, and they did that. Osama bin Laden is dead. Every person who conspired in the 9/11 attacks is either in U.S. custody or in the ground, and our soldiers did that. And we owe them a huge debt of gratitude for that. But that mission was accomplished years ago, and we're still there. and nobody can seem to tell us why we're still there.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't even have Al Qaeda anymore. It's now ISIS.
Right. And ISIS itself, has been dismantled and destroyed now, and yet we're still there.
Right.
And of course, it's frustrating when you look at our foreign policy. The story of ISIS is kind of the same as the story of Al Qaeda. People don't often realize that, like, Osama bin Laden was trained by the CIA.
Right.
Yes.
He was trained by the CIA to go after the Russians, to pull the Russians into what they called at the time, they wanted to create their own, the Russian version of Vietnam, to drain them dry, to bankrupt them, to pull them into a never-ending, impossible-to-win war in Afghanistan.
Right.
That's why Afghanistan's been known as the graveyard of empires. Alexander the Great couldn't conquer it. The Soviet Union couldn't conquer it. We're never going to be able to turn Afghanistan.
But that's like President Trump was saying. The Middle East has been at war for over 2,000 years.
Right.
So
we're not going to.
We're not
going
to
to defeat that war.
Right.
It's
you
a
can
war
look
of
at history.
ideas.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, and I wouldn't say that we can't win that war, but I think what you said there is very important. It is a war of ideas, and to think that guns and bullets and bombs are the only tools, the only weapons we have in a war of ideas. You can't win a war of ideas with those things. Now you can win a war, you can kill Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, you can do it that way, and we did that, and that was very important. But if we're trying to fight the idea of radical Islam, all we've been doing is when we drone strike people and we kill a terrorist, but then we kill 20 more people who are just happen to be bystanders there. All those 20 people have friends and family who now have a lot of reason to hate us, and so
a lot of resentment.
Right, and so we end up creating more terrorists.
Yeah,
Every
it's
terrorist we
this
kill,
perpetual cycle that seems to be never ending.
right? And so, but we can defeat these ideas because America is a culture factory. I mean, I read an article many years ago in the American Conservative magazine, and it was very interesting. They argued that, oddly enough, the best tool we have in the fight against radical Islam is Bollywood. It's this institution in the Middle East that kind of takes a lot of our Western ideas and translates it into a Middle Eastern context. That gets kind of young people to kind of accept some and take a lot of these Western ideas into their own lives. Even questions of, should I be able to choose my own spouse?
Right.
Things that we take for
Should
granted
women be able to
every
drive?
day. Right. Should women be able to drive? Absolutely.
Right.
I absolutely want to. We need to defeat radical Islamic terrorism, and the way that we do that is we need to be focused on importing our culture there and winning the war of ideas. But as long as we are bombing these countries unnecessarily, so long as there are so many civilian casualties, if we imagine if China did this to us, we would not be accepting China's ideas. Well, thankfully we're not. There's a lot of reasons not to accept China's ideas.
Right.
This is true.
But we can simply ask the question: how would we respond if another country did this to us? And start to realize that what we've been doing for 2 decades now is not an effective strategy to win the war on terror.
No, we have to figure out a better way to change
Hearts and minds, but
change
on
what we're doing.
steroids.
Instead of bullets and bombs, we got to speak about it.
Right. We in Vietnam, we went into Vietnam. We tried to defeat communism in Vietnam by fighting a war there. It didn't work out very well.
No.
But since then, as we have engaged with Vietnam with trade and commerce, they've westernized far more through those kinds of exchanges. They've accepted more and more capitalism and democratic ideas through those kinds of exchanges than they ever did when we were at war with them. Mm-hmm. War should really be a last resort, but I think because there are a lot of special interests in Washington, D.C. that make a lot of money on war, too often it's the first resort. And that's frankly why I'm so proud of President Trump for calling it out. He's the first president in my lifetime since Eisenhower who's called it out for what it is, the military-industrial complex.
And he warned us about it.
Absolutely.
And we still let it happen.
Yeah. Well, and of course the saddest thing is, for a lot of us back at home, the costs of war, we pay for it with our tax dollars, we pay for it with the mounting $23 trillion in debt, we pay for it with
nobody
inflation.
even mentions anymore.
Yeah, nobody mentions it
Just
anymore.
get swept under the rug.
But these costs can feel so far away for us. But for our military men and women and for their families, they're the ones who are paying the immediate costs for these things. And I think that's why if we say that we support our troops, the first thing we have to do is we have to actually listen to them. And our troops are saying by huge margins, it's time to come home from these wars. And President Trump, there's a lot of opposition he faces.
He's had a lot of ridicule talking, doing what he's done over in Syria with bringing the U.S. back.
Isn't it crazy that Congress never authorized war in Syria in the first place?
True.
The American people were hugely opposed to putting our troops in Syria. Congress never authorized it, and yet Barack Obama put troops in there anyway. And so,
that was the red line in the sand, right?
Right.
It was crossed very quickly.
Right. Well, and so Obama put our troops in there, and then Congress never authorized it. But now that Trump is trying to bring our troops out of a congressionally unauthorized war, now Congress is up in arms saying, "How dare you bring our troops over?" Right. It's
now it's an issue.
Right. If they want our troops in Syria, they need to vote to declare war. That's what the Constitution says.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Give the power back to Congress,
right.
Even though they don't want it.
Problem is, they don't know who they would declare war on. Would they declare war on?
Needs to be a concise exit strategy as well.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that's where Trump has excelled. Is he's able to think the 7, 8, 9 steps ahead instead of coming to it and then not speaking about it, reaching that point. It's an issue. It's a problem. It's the end of the world.
Yeah.
So I give him a lot of respect to him for that alone.
Well, I think a lot of people they voted for him because of his foreign policy outlook and not trying to intermingle in their overseas issues and pulling the troops back home. And
I think you're right. And I will say, at least for myself, I mean, that was it for me. I mean, I'll be honest, when I look back at kind of the primary race, I was deeply skeptical of Donald Trump. I was a big Rand Paul supporter. And of course, you may remember in the primary debates, Rand and Donald Trump were at
each other's throats.
Yeah, they were at each other's throats in the debates. Of course, today, fast forward, they're two of the biggest allies in Washington because they're both outsiders and they share a lot of the same enemies in the Washington D.C. establishment. But I was deeply skeptical of him in the primary. Even in the general, I was still skeptical of him. But the big thing I kind of hung my hat on was, well, I know that Hillary Clinton is a warmonger. She has supported every war from the war in Iraq. She's calling for shooting Russian planes out of the sky over Syria. She's going to start.
I saw that.
Yeah. She would have started World War III.
Yep.
And I figured Trump didn't have a record. I heard some of his rhetoric. I was skeptical. I'm skeptical of any aspiring politician, especially when they don't
have votes to back it up.
Exactly. And so I kind of viewed it a little bit as kind of playing Russian roulette, where Hillary Clinton, I had 6 rounds in the chamber. I knew what was going to happen if I pulled that trigger.
It brings it back to that question of the seniority in Washington that it seems to pay to have.
Yeah. But I will say with Trump, I with some skepticism, I voted for him because I knew he wasn't Hillary Clinton, and I figured I wanted. Let's take the risk and see what happens. There was at least a risk that something good would happen. And frankly, he has, in a lot of ways, and I'm not saying he's perfect, but he has really surpassed my expectations in so many ways. From, I think, really solid tax reform to excellent judges. My personal favorite, Neil Gorsuch, who's the most libertarian Supreme Court justice we have there. But on the big issues, on the foreign policy, when he's tried to make changes, that's where they have fought him tooth and nail. Mm-hmm. Not just the Democrats, but the entrenched,
politicians on both sides and the agencies.
Right, and I mean, you look at the Mueller investigation, everything we went through for 2.5 years, and they came up with nothing. I really think it was about reining him in on foreign policy, stopping him from being effective and changing our attitude towards some of these countries. I mean, he advocated, people elected him on the promise that why can't we talk to Russia?
Right.
Why can't Russia doesn't like ISIS, we don't like ISIS. Why can't we work together to destroy ISIS?
Right.
But
common goal.
Yes. Right. But and that's what people elected. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be in this permanent war posture. We want to start to engage diplomatically with and try to solve some of these problems diplomatically. But that's not what these special interests in Washington want. And that's why Donald Trump needs backup in Washington, D.C. Certainly Jared Golden isn't doing that. Jared Golden is supporting the impeachment witch hunt.
Well, I think the thing that really bothered me is look at how long he held off to announce his position alone on where he stood on the impeachment. That alone tells if I was to look at it, it tells me that why is he procrastinating? Is he trying to see who he can choose as his friends? You see what I mean? He's not going to hold a solid foundation on the issue.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I think it's fundamental. Look, I'm not going to say anything bad about Jared Golden personally. Jared Golden and I served in Augusta the same 4-year period. He was in the House. I was in the Senate. I actually, I got to know him pretty well. I actually, when I was sponsoring constitutional carry to restore Second Amendment rights, I got him to be a co-sponsor of the bill.
Awesome.
I went to him and I asked him to co-sponsor it. Now he had to go and make sure he could get permission first to co-sponsor it. But he did co-sponsor it until the Michael Bloomberg money started coming in.
Yeah.
And then he flipped and he voted against it 3 times. I look at Jared, and Jared's a nice guy. I don't think he knows what he believes. And I think he's in over his head. And I think that's why he's essentially been a do-nothing congressman. We have some very big challenges in front of us as a country. We have unelected agencies that have run amok. Not just in terms of what they're doing to President Trump, what they're doing to our lobster industry here in our state. You have an
I had just made a post. It was Billy
Representative Falkingham. Billy Bob Falkingham.
Yes, I always forget how to say his last name.
Yeah.
Well, he had taken a screenshot of whales.org, and it shows where the whales have been spotted. Well, one of these whales, he had taken the screenshot, and one of these whales was in one of the rivers, but it was like heading towards Ironworks. So it shows the airs of where the issues are within their software that lies.
Yeah.
So how can you say this information is legit when it can be that easily disproven or manipulated?
Right. Yeah, and maybe folks who are watching don't know the backstory on this. I will say, so you have an unelected agency that has unilaterally decided that we have to cut the number of lobster lines we have off the coast of Maine in half. And let's be frank, this would decimate our Maine lobster industry. Which is
a $1 billion industry.
Oh yeah, $1 billion industry. Throw a lot of people out of work. Plus, it's an icon for the state of Maine. Maine people have been pioneering sustainable fishing practices for generations, and there has not been a single case of a right whale being caught in these lobster lines in Maine waters in at least the last 20 years, probably a lot longer than that. And not to mention,
they haven't even really been spotted in the areas that they're doing the lobster.
Right. Not to mention, our lobstermen have invested in breakaway lines so that if they encounter a force like a right whale, that the lines will snap so the whales don't get entangled in it. But we can have a debate about whether or not this is good policy or bad policy. Frankly, I think it's stupid policy. But the bigger question is, when did we as Maine people get to have a say in this?
Yes.
Right.
Did we vote on this? Did our elected officials vote on this? No.
It just gets dumped on, the Maine people.
It's an unelected agency doing this. This is regulation without representation. This is not how our country was supposed to happen.
Absolutely.
And we have Jared Golden there. Again, nice guy. He says, "Oh, I care about this. I'm going to fight to make a difference. Let me get my put an amendment in to have the federal government research it more, and even that he can only get 10 Democrats to vote for it. Let me write my strongly worded letter to let the agency know I'm not happy about this." But what do those strongly worded letters do? This is kind of just feel-good stuff, trying to make it look like he's doing something.
Right.
When he hasn't actually done anything. What needs to happen is we actually need to rein these out-of-control agencies. Senator Rand Paul has sponsored something in the Senate that I intend to sponsor in the House. It's called the REINS Act. And it's very simple. All it does is, if these unelected agencies propose a regulation that would harm our economy by more than $100 million, our national economy, that Congress has to vote on it and approve it before it can go into effect. Basic premise of government of the people, by the people, for the people, that our elected officials have a say in these policies. Right now they don't have a say, so we don't have a say.
Yes. We
need to reassert our authority as the American people. We need to not let these unelected agencies run our country.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Rand Paul because he's more liberty-minded, obviously, like his dad.
Yeah, and of course I'm very proud to have the endorsement of Senator Rand Paul, Congressman Ron Paul. They've both been heroes and mentors to me.
They've both been in Maine. I've seen them both speak.
Yes. Oh yeah,
Ron Paul a few years ago back at Colby. Rand Paul was at the GOP convention in Bangor.
Yeah,
a few years ago.
Of course, we got Rand Paul up here during my U.S. Senate campaign last year. He came up to Yarmouth, and we had a big event. It was packed wall to wall with people. It was awesome. It was so packed. You had some people standing out in the parking lot just trying to stick their head in to see what's going on. I wish a good problem to have when you can't fit everyone in. Of course. I'd love to be able to fit everyone in.
Exactly.
But
yeah, that's awesome. I guess with I guess we could talk about the bonds issues. How do you feel about the bonds issues that were just recently?
Oh, like the transportation bond?
Yeah, it was the transportation. What was the other one?
I just know there's a big bond that always gets
the second one was.
I vote no every time.
Right. I do too.
We don't have the money to afford it. We have to borrow money.
As a rule, I generally vote against bonds. I will say that transportation bonds are probably the least bad of the bonds that are out there. Because at least that's borrowing for something that is a real clear infrastructure need, something that you're doing a big upfront cost for something that's going to last for a long period of time. In that case, bonding makes a little bit more sense than some other things that we bond for. But I just couldn't bring myself to vote for it when how massively the state government budget has expanded this go around, how much we're in fiscal trouble as a state. Janet Mills says there's no tax increases in this budget. Oh, she just spent every single penny she could get her hold of, raided the rainy day fund, raided the surpluses. So she spent everything we have while the economy is good. But I think those of us who understand kind of the business cycle and understand that in some ways the economy is kind of in a bubble right now. And that
there'll be a time that the economy's not good and we're going to have to use that rainy day fund.
Yeah, and we're not going to have it. We're in trouble as a state. It might not be immediately apparent to people, but that bill is going to come due. The tax revenue is not going to keep flowing. We're going to hit a hard economy, especially when this bubble pops. This bubble is, there's been some very good things. I think the tax reform, the tax cuts that Trump put into place have contributed to good things in our economy. That said, ultimately, a lot of the economy is being funded by just more quantitative easing, printing money at the Federal Reserve, creating a bubble. That bubble's going to pop, and it's going to be a bad day when that happens.
It's about like 6 months until something happens and it pops.
Well, it's
impossible to know when, but
you have people on the left that are deliberately trying to crash the economy.
I think they certainly want to crash the economy before Trump gets reelected.
Right. So you have that happening, and I guess how would you help against to try to stop something like that? I guess.
Yeah. So I think that tax reform was good and cutting taxes is a good thing on the federal level. We ultimately need to understand that the decision to spend is the decision to tax. So if you're cutting taxes but you're growing spending, really in the long run you're not really cutting taxes, because there's three ways that government takes money from us. They steal it directly from our paychecks with taxes, yes, but they also steal it from our futures with the $23 trillion of debt that we're in, on top of the $100+ trillion of unfunded liabilities we have. When you break that down, that's actually a bill of over $1 million for every single American taxpayer. And then there's the other way that they get it, the most insidious way, the most unseen way, which is inflation. They print money out of thin air, and the value of all of those dollars comes from every dollar already in circulation. So everything you've saved for your retirement, everything you've tried to save for your future, they are literally stealing the value of your savings.
Levying against it.
Right. To fund this addiction to spending that Washington, D.C. has. Now, sadly, when Democrats were in charge, Republicans sounded like the fiscally conservative party.
Right.
But
like the Tea Party folks.
Right. Yes. But once Republicans took charge, it became very clear there was no fiscally conservative party. So we need to rein in the spending. We can do some things like, Senator Rand Paul has proposed things like the penny plan. The penny plan, if you just cut 1 penny from every dollar of federal spending every single year, give every agency across the board a 1% haircut every year. At least as of last year, the models said that you could balance the budget in 5 years. Now, that would require that it has to be a real spending cut, so you freeze spending where it is now, and then you cut it back from where it is.
And I think to make it so that people can understand that is picture it as Walmart changing the price on something about 3 or 4 cents.
Right.
At the end of the end of the cycle, that's millions of dollars for them.
Yeah.
So something to put in contrast.
Right.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Oh,
off.
no, you're right. Well, and one of the dangerous things, whenever we try to cut spending in Washington, they do this kind of shell game where they say, so if we wanted to, if they plan to increase spending by 10%, and we said, this is crazy, let's only increase spending by 9%, they say, these are draconian spending cuts. It's kind of like if I planned to gain 10 pounds and I only gained 9 pounds, like saying, I lost a pound. No, you didn't. You didn't. You got heavier. Right. At Washington, D.C., their budget is getting heavier and heavier. So real spending cuts means we need to freeze spending where it is and we need to cut it from where we are. Frankly, truth be told, we should be, if we're going to be really getting spending under control, we need to look at some of these unconstitutional agencies where we spend billions of dollars and we don't get results. Constitution never authorized them. Frankly, like departments like the Department of Education, which was only created in the 1970s, we spend billions of dollars not on education, but on education bureaucracy.
Yeah,
it doesn't go to the
right.
It doesn't go to the classroom. It doesn't go to the teachers. It goes to bureaucrats micromandating our teachers and telling them how to teach. I know so many teachers who are
those are some of the mandates that I was looking to try to change, if possible, if I was elected. So.
Yeah, I say Constitution. You read Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution. Yeah. Nowhere in the Constitution we give the federal government any authority over education. Cut the federal Department of Education. Leave it to the states. The federal government makes education worse. It doesn't make it better. Some people say, well, if you cut... Some people said, Eric Brakey wants to cut the federal Department of Education. Why does Eric Brakey think we shouldn't have education?
Right.
I was like,
right.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. We here in Maine understand what our students need better than Washington, D.C. bureaucrats do.
We have 50 laboratories that we can test things out with.
Right.
Let them go back to the states.
Absolutely. We don't need one-size-fits-all solutions from Washington, D.C. We should be able to make our own decisions. Right. They don't fit. They don't work. It hasn't been working. Ask yourself, is our education system in this country better than it was in the 1970s before we had the Federal Department of Education? Right. Absolutely not. It gets worse and worse every year. And we got to, freedom is the answer.
So what do you think of the balanced budget amendment?
I support a balanced budget amendment. I will say what I really support, though, is a balanced budget.
Right.
and I would, if a balanced budget amendment was put in front of me, I would vote for it in a heartbeat. But I think that a balanced budget amendment, I remember when I was running against Angus King last year, even he came out for a balanced budget amendment.
Yeah.
He's one of the biggest spenders in Washington, D.C. What I found is that a balanced...
ironic.
What I found is a balanced budget amendment it tends to be a place for big spenders to run to say, oh, we'll fix this budget problem if we pass a balanced budget amendment. But meanwhile, people like Senator Rand Paul have proposed actual budgets that balance.
Right.
And do they vote for it? No, they don't.
Doesn't make sense.
So, yeah, if you're for a balanced budget amendment, that doesn't mean a lot to me unless you're actually for balancing the budget. We don't need an amendment to do it. We could do it. But yeah, I would vote for a balanced budget amendment, but we should support balanced budgets even without it.
What about this? Term limits?
I support term limits. I signed a pledge to support term limits when I was running for U.S. Senate. I haven't signed that yet for Congress. I intend to. 2 terms, 2 6-year terms for Senate, maximum of 6 2-year terms for House. I don't think that's the silver bullet that will fix all of our problems.
No, but I think it will help a lot.
I think we'll fix some of our problems.
Yeah, because then it gets into the argument. Yeah. The argument about seniority.
Yeah. I will say I do think that Thomas Massey is one of my heroes in Washington. There's
mine too.
Very few of them. And Thomas Massey has been helping me.
Justin Amash.
Yeah, Thomas Massey has been helping me in quite a bit in this campaign for Congress. He's been actually I got him to promise that. Well, we haven't worked out the details, but I got him to promise we could get him to come up here to Maine at some point.
That'd be awesome.
I promised him some lobster to get him to do it. Hey. So we'll see if we can work that out. But Thomas Massey pointed out, I think it's a good point. He says the problem in Washington, D.C. is not necessarily the people who have been there forever. It's the problem is the people who got there and sold out on day one.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I do support term limits in Washington. I'd also love to see if there's some way that we could term limit the lobbyists and the staffs.
Right.
Because that is one of the unintended consequences of term limits. Though, if you don't deal with the problem of the lobbyists and the staffs become the ones with all the seniority who knows how things work in Washington, and now you have new people coming in who are dependent on these experienced hands, and the people we elect tend to become puppets.
So what do you think is the right regulation for that? I think right now it's like, what, you can't lobby for a year after you leave Congress?
Yeah, I mean...
Do you put lifetime bans? Or?
I wouldn't say lifetime.
Right, no, I'm just saying.
Maybe like 3 years.
Yeah,
right.
The hard thing is, I feel like all these things are tinkering around the edges. You know, people talk about, well, how do you get, like, the same kind of thing about the conversation about money in politics. The left wants to repeal Citizens United, which really means, like, repealing the First Amendment of the Constitution. The answer ultimately has to be, you're not going to fix Washington until you restore the Constitution and you get the power out of Washington.
Right.
You got
checks and balances.
As long as we accept this idea that all of that we should have this top-down government where all the power rests in this single place in Washington D.C., you're going to have everyone and their brother trying to buy that power. Yes. But if we returned to the idea of federalism that our founders believed in, that we should be able to make our own decisions in our own states and the laboratories of innovation, you know, the more you decentralize power, the harder it is for the special interests to buy it off. It's a lot easier to buy off power if it's concentrated in one place in Washington D.C. than 50 different state capitals, or how many thousands of different municipalities across the country. Mm-hmm. If we return to this idea that we restore the Constitution, we let us make more local decisions, then you're going to see the special interests lose their power.
Just give us the liberties back.
Yeah.
To make our own decision.
Yeah.
And I think that alone would be all very beneficial for people. So
absolutely.
I guess we'll wrap it up.
Well, I guess when we're wrapping up, let me just say I really appreciate being on with you all. For anyone who's watching, please go and check out my website, ericbrakey.com. We are actually it's kind of made some heads explode over the Portland Press Herald. We're having a raffle for an AR-15 rifle. The raffle ends actually tomorrow, Sunday, November 17th. If you become a monthly donor to our campaign, which you can do for as little as $5 a month, well, we encourage you to certainly do more. You'll be entered into that raffle. You have a chance to win. It's a Wyndham Weaponry AR-15, $1,200 value. Great firearm made right here in Maine, and you can make some heads explode. Well, you can make rhetorically heads explode. But of course, an AR-15, no different than a hunting rifle. Just what the Democrats seem to want to try to ban because
it looks scary.
It looks scary.
Right.
It looks scary.
Even though it's really no different than like a 223 would be.
Yeah. Right. But of course, I'm known for the Second Amendment, you know, and so we did this raffle to celebrate 4 years of constitutional carry in the state of Maine, the law that I helped usher through when I was in the Maine Senate.
That's a big thing you did. Thank you for doing that.
Well, and really it wasn't just me, it was thousands and thousands of Maine people. Maybe you guys were even involved in that fight at the time.
I think I helped get signatures if I remember right.
Yeah, well I know, we were certainly encouraging people to call and email their legislators to hold them accountable.
Yeah, I definitely emailed mine.
Well, good.
I had my concealed weapons permit, but a lot of people don't go that route, so I think it's awesome for people now that don't have to.
Well, then thank you both for being a part of the effort for constitutional carry, because if it was just me, it never would have happened. It was really all of us working together, making the politicians afraid of the consequences, political consequences come re-election season if they don't vote for our constitutional
exactly.
freedoms.
If they want to stay in office, you're going to have to start listening.
Yeah.
So, and that's what people need to start remembering. That's why it's important to get out and vote.
Yeah.
Get out and get that vote out.
Absolutely.
Because it really counts in the local level for races like yours.
Absolutely.
So
go to ericbrakey.com and chip in and get a chance to win an AR-15.
So definitely thank you for checking out All Sides of Kennebec. I'm Sean Caron.
I'm Jeremy Lee's-Up.
And this is Eric Brakey. Until next time, guys, be easy and remember, true patriot questions everything.